Hello Raptors fans, and welcome back to Raptors Report. Today we are going to be discussing the Toronto Raptors game against the New York Knicks. But before we do that, I've got a little Christmas present for all of you. And it's probably the laziest gift that you can give someone in terms of content. And if you're familiar with basketball content, you know what I'm talking about. Fake trades. That's right. I have 3 presents for you today. 3 fake trades that I've worked very hard on. I've slaved over the Fanspo trade machine to bring you these gifts like an elf in Santa's workshop. I've been racking my brain trying to come up with different trade scenarios for the Raptors, 3 of their most tradable assets on the Raptors this season. And we're going to start off with probably the most valuable trade chip the Toronto Raptors have, and that is Jakob Poeltl. Jakob Poeltl is kind of a beloved figure within Toronto, especially this season, because for anybody who has watched the game for longer than a couple of years, defense, doing the dirty work, being a smart player who does the little things, and especially in a city like Toronto, if there's one town that likes a good role player, be it in hockey, be it in basketball, a town that enjoys players who put in the hard work, the elbow grease, maybe have a little bit of toughness to their game, Toronto likes those types of players, and so Jakob Poeltl has become somewhat of a folk hero here, and he's played very well for the Toronto Raptors. There's no surprise that he would fetch a good sum on the trade market if you were to trade him this season. And this is a fake trade that I envisioned for Jakob Poeltl, and I was mentioning that I think the Raptors should be looking for a return of 2 or 3 first-round draft picks. And the unfortunate thing is within the NBA, you have to look at teams that are both looking for a center, looking for a player that brings what Jakob Poeltl provides, and also has first-round draft picks to trade. And one such team, a team that is on the rise in the Eastern Conference, a team that has some centers but nobody special, and a team that has both tradable salary that is not doing a whole lot for them, and also has first-round picks to spare. And that kind of narrows the list down. And that team is the Orlando Magic. And the Orlando Magic, the trade that I proposed here is Gary Harris, who is owed $7.5 million over the next 2 seasons. Jet Howard, a draft pick of the Orlando Magic. He was drafted just before Grady Dick, so they might probably be regretting that one. He hasn't been very good for them. Owed $5.2 million per year over the next few seasons. And then 2 first-round picks, one this year and one in 2027 for Jakob Poeltl. The idea behind this trade is that Gary Harris has been pretty poor for them. He's simply no longer an impact player, probably not even a rotation player. He's expendable for them. And Jet Howard has been disappointing for them. He's not shooting the ball particularly well. He simply has not played very well for them. The 2 gets here for the Toronto Raptors are 2 first-round picks. So one this year and one 2 years from now. The Magic look like they're going to be doing pretty well over the next few seasons. They're probably going to be one of the better teams in the league. So these picks are probably not going to be lottery picks. However, they are first-round picks, and first-round picks are the currency in the NBA. Those are the things that teams are looking to trade for, looking to hoard. You've seen what happened with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Those draft picks are kind of worth their weight in gold. They're bargaining chips that you can use to acquire players from teams, players like Jakob Poeltl. Down the line, if the Raptors are looking to make a trade to get one more impact player, well, guess what? Not only are you going to have a player that you can develop next season with the 2025 pick, you're also going to have that 2027 pick in your bag to acquire a player down the road. This may not blow the socks off of the people who are really big fans of Jakob Poeltl. You'd be sending an impact player to the Orlando Magic, hastening their rise in the Eastern Conference, probably a bitter pill to swallow. But what I'll say is that Jakob Poeltl is under contract for this season and the following season, and then it'll probably be difficult with the Toronto Raptors cap figure to be able to retain him at a decent price, and he could also be looking to move on at that point because he did sign with the Toronto Raptors even after Fred VanVleet left the team. The Toronto Raptors got lucky because he could have easily signed elsewhere, even after making that trade with the San Antonio Spurs. So the Raptors definitely got lucky. It might be time to cash in the chips now rather than in the future. So that's my reasoning for the trade. Did you enjoy your first present? Let me know in the comments. Next up, we are going to be exploring a Kelly Olynyk trade. Kelly Olynyk signed an extension with the Toronto Raptors this past offseason, and the trade that I'm proposing is to the Los Angeles Lakers for Gabe Vincent, Maxwell Lewis, and a 2025, so this year's second-round draft pick. Gabe Vincent is a player that the Lakers are trying to kind of make work. He has played some minutes for them. He's a decent defensive guard, and his on-off splits and all that kind of stuff, they're not that bad. But in terms of bringing offensive skills to the table, he has been a complete nightmare for them. He has been one of their worst signings perhaps ever, so they're probably eager to move on. Maxwell Lewis was a 2023 second-round draft pick who has made his way to the Lakers. He would be included simply to make the salaries work because the Lakers are over the apron, so they have to send out more salary than they take in. And he might be an interesting player to, develop. But really, this would be simply a way to get a second-round pick. And Kelly Olynyk, he is 33 years old. I think he has a little bit of gas left in the tank. He's been pretty good for the Raptors. And the Lakers would probably be interested in another player that can help run their offense, help grab rebounds, that they can bring in to make smart decisions. That would be the idea for the LA Lakers. And for the Toronto Raptors, simply just getting another pick, getting a second-round pick that you can use to develop. And if you're worried about the return for Kelly Olynyk, take a look at what the Toronto Raptors did this season with their second-round picks. Jonathan Mobo is looking very good. Jamal Shed has really come on. I've been impressed with him. The Toronto Raptors are a good developmental club. Giving them the opportunity to pick in the second round, I think, would be a boon for them. So that's the idea from the Toronto Raptors perspective. And last, under the Christmas tree, we are going to discuss, this is probably the spiciest of all trades because it's wild. I actually had to do a lot of work and thinking of how to trade Chris Boucher. Chris Boucher has a very unique set of skills. He's kind of like the Liam Neeson of the NBA. He is a wacky player, but he can do a lot of interesting stuff, and he has a lot of energy. He's definitely a backup player that you want to bring off of the bench and kind of mix it up. What is a team that really needs some bench production? What is a team that needs some additional bigs, maybe some crazy energy? I'm thinking the Denver Nuggets. The Denver Nuggets are really lacking off of the bench. They need a guy who can give them instant impact, and I think he would be honestly really good with Nikola Jokic if they share the court together, because Chris Boucher is a really good cutter. He can stand beyond the three-point arc. He's a shot, it comes and goes, but sometimes he can get hot, and maybe that's what they need. I mean, they're really lacking off of the bench. The real struggle here was finding a deal that makes sense for both teams. And this one is wild, okay? So you're gonna have to bear with me here. So the Denver Nuggets made a really boneheaded decision of signing Zeke Naji, one of their draft picks from a few years back, and he has just not delivered. He's been really poor for them. They signed him to a pretty substantial contract, like a long contract, run 4 years, $8.8 million per year. He has not delivered for them. That was just really didn't make any sense for them. So the Nuggets have a couple of players who are young and would have to be aggregated together in order to take on Chris Boucher's contract. And they're probably not interested in doing that. They've got some good young players or interesting young players. Christian Brown, Julian Strawther, Peyton Watson. Those guys are playing minutes for the Nuggets, and I don't think they want to give up on those guys. So how do you make the contracts work? Well, take on Zeke Naji for Chris Boucher. I'm not a Zeke Naji fan, so why would they do this? Well, why would they do it? They're giving the Raptors a first-round pick. And yeah, I mean, this is an odd trade because Chris Boucher is probably not worth a first-round pick, and his contract expires at the end of the season. But this would give them some juice this season and also erase a mistake off the Denver Nuggets cap sheet. Zeke Naji, if you get rid of him and then you give them a little bit more wiggle room this coming off season just by erasing him from their books, maybe that's worth a first-round pick for them. And you give them a guy who can eat minutes, who can come off of the bench and give them a spark. They're definitely trying to win this season, so they don't want this dead weight guy on their books kind of doing nothing for them. Wouldn't you rather have a guy like Chris Boucher who can turn the tide of a game even if he is a little inconsistent? Yeah, probably. So this is probably the spiciest trade. This is the one where, let me know if I was cooking here or if I burned the kitchen down. I'm interested to hear what you think about this trade in particular. Okay, let's get to the player evaluations because the Raptors did play last night, and we'll start with Scottie Barnes, because he had the bounce back game. He was horrendous in the game before, and he was pretty good in this game. And he was good in a number of capacities. So the first one is the scoring. He only took 3 threes. I'll count that as a victory, even though he went 0 for 3 from 3 this past game, but he knew when to stop, and he decided to take a couple steps inwards. So instead of taking threes, he was taking mid-range shots, and that seemed to work a lot better for him. He had the turnaround post fade going. He had a couple of pull-ups from just inside the arc, and he was hitting those shots. His playmaking was good. He had 8 assists. He did have 5 turnovers, 8 assists to 5 turnovers. Not the most fantastic evening, but also not a complete disaster. I think given the tools that he has to work with, I'll accept it, although I'm not going to be, shaking my pom-poms over it. 3 rebounds, which is not that impressive considering he played center a lot this game. But one thing that I did like from him was his defense. I thought that his post defense and what he was doing, he was coming over and providing help. I did like what I saw from him in that capacity. And while the Raptors did kind of get blown out of the building with 139 points against, you can't pin that all on Scottie. I did think that he got some stops around the rim. He did make it difficult in certain circumstances, but unfortunately, the Knicks are very good. They're a very good offensive ball club, and OG Anunoby had it going, and there were a lot of circumstances where it was simply the Knicks being a little too skilled offensively rather than saying that Scottie Barnes didn't do a good job protecting the basket. I thought he did a pretty good job as a small ball C. And I think that kind of lineup can work in the future. Maybe the Raptors can turn lemons into lemonade here, because with Jakob Poeltl off of the floor, they have to explore these small ball lineups. And I think that Scottie Barnes is one of the players that could play that role, especially in a closing group. The Warriors very famously had that death lineup where they ran Draymond Green at center to close the game, and something like that could happen maybe down the road with the Raptors when they're not so shorthanded. Next up, we'll go to RJ Barrett. He had been sick for the past 2 games. He was a game time decision before the Rockets game, but he was like barfing before the game, so probably don't want to play in that game. He came back versus his old club in Madison Square Garden, and I think he had a good game. Pretty convincing performance, 23 points on 13 shots. He was 1 of 4 from 3. He went to the line a bunch, 8 free throw attempts, had 6 rebounds, 6 assists, only 3 turnovers. I thought it was a very solid game from him. He didn't have one quarter where he went off, but he did score steadily throughout the game. And unfortunately for the Toronto Raptors, OG Anunoby had a really, really good game. So you're going to compare the trade. You're going to say, okay, well, OG had a fantastic night. RJ had a pretty good night. So in comparison, it's not amazing. But of course, the Toronto Raptors have a guy who they got back for OG Anunoby, who is sitting on the bench right now. So you can't fully evaluate the trade. But I thought it was a good night for RJ Barrett. I don't think he had an amazing night on the defensive end, but when you look at it holistically, I think he had a pretty decent night. Next up, Grady Dick. Grady Dick had what I would consider a good night on offense. He started the game cold. He was missing a lot of shots. But then in the second half, he kind of regained his composure and his form on his jump shot. He scored 16 points on 13 shots. He was 2 of 5 from 3, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, and 2 turnovers. So if you look at it from a stat sheet perspective, he had a good game. The defense, again, not a very good night. The unfortunate part is that with the Raptors being shorthanded and small on the inside, guys like OG Anunoby, who are very big and rugged, whenever OG was being guarded by Grady Dick, it was kind of like barbecue chicken. He would catch it and then just move Grady out of the way and Hulk mode to the basket and dunk and make layups. He'd catch over top of Grady. It was, he was outmatched. If you ever see OG Anunoby. He's built like a brick. He is just a massive person. Grady Dick is, he's not a shrimp or anything like that, but he's not in any way comparable to OG from a physical perspective. So that's not really a matchup you want to see very often, and we saw it a bunch last night, and it wasn't that pretty. I think that he did it pretty well again on switches. When Jalen Brunson switched onto him, he had a couple of good possessions, kind of like the game against the Rockets, where the Rockets tried to isolate Fred VanVleet against Grady Dick, and I thought that Grady held his ground and did an okay job, and the help defense came over to cut off the penetration from Jalen Brunson. So he did okay in those scenarios, but not a great defensive night from him, but a good night on offense. So split the difference, I guess. Next up, Ochai Agbaji. Ochai Agbaji actually had a good defensive night, but he was poor on offense. So he missed a bunch of shots. He scored 4 points on 6 shots. He was 0 for 4 from 3. That's not really what you want to see. But who is he guarding? One of the best offensive players in the league, Jalen Brunson, and he did a great job. Jalen Brunson had a tough game. He scored 12 points on 13 shots with 7 assists and 3 turnovers, and that's about as good as you can guard a player who is that elite on offense. I thought he did a great job moving his feet, staying with Jalen Brunson and not fouling. He only committed 2 fouls during that game. Jalen Brunson's great at drawing fouls. He has that herky-jerky movement. He's able to bait players into fouls and that kind of thing. I thought Ochai did a great job guarding Jalen Brunson. So overall, I'm going to say that he had a good night. If you're able to shut down an offensive player like that, where they're taking more shots than they have points, and you're not fouling, doing any of that kind of stuff, I think that he had a really good night on defense and a pretty forgettable night on offense, but on the balance, I think a positive game from him. Last up, Jonathan Mobo. Jonathan Mobo, 8 points on 4 shots, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 turnover. Jonathan Mobo showed his limitations as a center last night. I thought that he and Scotty Barnes were the front court for the Toronto Raptors, and I thought Scotty Barnes did a good job defensively. I think that Mobo had some moments where he shone and looked good. He had a really good defensive possession on Cat early in the game, and he can switch on the perimeter and do that kind of stuff. But in terms of protecting the basket, I think that there's a lot that he leaves to be desired. He's not necessarily bringing those rim protection elements that you want to see from that position. I think that this was one of those games, like a lot of the time he plays beyond the box score and does a lot of really good things. I don't think it was a great performance from him last night, and I think that the bench bigs, Kelly Olynyk and Chris Boucher, had better evenings than him, which is why he only played 23 minutes despite starting. I've seen better games from Jonathan Mobo. Growth is not linear, it's a journey, so I'm going to continue to remain patient with him, but we'll move to the bench. This was the second good Chris Boucher game in a row. His 3-point shot is back, ladies and gentlemen. He shot 4 of 5 from 3. He splashed threes all night long. He ended up with 16 points. He only missed 1 shot. He only took 1 shot inside the arc. Pretty much all of them were threes. He had 3 rebounds, 1 assist, 3 steals, a block, and 0 turnovers. Pretty much the optimal Chris Boucher game. He really brought it, and he did a good job on the offensive side of the ball, and he was disruptive on defense. I thought he had a pretty marvelous game. It seems like his performances go up and then he stays up for a while, and you hear me praising him and saying how great he is for the Toronto Raptors, and then he hits those slumps where he's in there for a couple of weeks and people are tearing their hair out. That's the kind of player he is, and it kind of averages out to a decent player, but last night he was better than decent. He was really good. Kelly Olynyk also had a good night. 6 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 turnover. He made both of the threes he took. That's how he got the 6 points. He's a steadying force on offense. He can take care of the ball. You can run your plays through him. He's not going to make many mistakes on that end. When you play him major minutes, there's going to be a defensive fall off where they're taking it to you at the rim a lot. And the Knicks were on fire from outside. They were scoring at the rim. So it wasn't just that he was being bad or they were picking on him and Boucher or something in the paint. They were just kind of scoring from all over. But having a guy who is not a very good rim protector playing as your center, that's going to create some opportunities for the other team. Kelly Olynyk is kind of a double-edged sword. He's going to help you on offense and then probably hurt you on defense. And you're just hoping that what he delivers on the offensive side of the ball makes up for what he's giving up on the other end. And I think he did that last night, making those threes. His three-point shooting, if you are another GM, take a look at his three-point shot. He's shooting 46% from three this season. So if you need a stretch big, maybe he's a guy that you want to take a look at. Jacoby Walter had another really good game. 16 points on 5 shots. He went to the line a ton. He shot 10 free throws, 1 rebound, 2 blocks. He had some really nice hustle plays where he dove on loose balls, and he made a whole bunch of really good effort plays. A lot of the scoring came when the game was kind of out of reach, but he did do a good job of scoring the ball, and he didn't have the shot going. He only attempted 1 3-point shot, but he was scoring inside the arc and using his good first step to get into the paint and draw fouls. It's really encouraging to see him have another really efficient night from the field. 16 points on 5 shots, albeit with 10 free throws. I mean, that's really good. That is what you want to see. Very efficient. I think that I've been really impressed with what I've seen from him, especially lately. He's starting to come on. You love to see it. Hopefully when guys start coming back from injury, maybe in the new year, he still maintains a position within the lineup and we can see what he brings, because his growth is one of the major storylines this season. Very happy to see that. There are a couple of other players. I mean, Oris Chomsky played, Davion Mitchell, AJ Lawson played, Jamison Battle played. Nobody really had a big standout game there, so I'm not really going to dive into the stats, but it was pretty much just a blowout. The Raptors started off the game pretty well. They were playing good switching defense. I thought that was where their small ball lineup was working well. They were turning over the Knicks, but then the Knicks kind of figured it out. When the Raptors were bringing 2 to the ball, they were leaving a guy open. OG Anunoby made them pay multiple times. Cameron Payne had his wacky-looking shot going. The Toronto Raptors were able to squeeze a couple of good offensive performances out of some of the starters, and of course Jacoby Walter, but it wasn't able to keep pace with the Knicks, who are one of the elite offensive clubs in the NBA. And when you're lacking your best defender, your best post defender, your only true big man in Jakob Poeltl, guys like Karl Anthony Towns, who's an inside-out player, and OG Anunoby, who's a very strong, rugged, big player, those guys are going to abuse you on the inside, and they did. OG Anunoby had a whole ton of dunks, and Karl Anthony Towns drew a ton of fouls, because you kind of have to foul a guy that big and skilled when he gets into the paint. They didn't have an answer for Cat. And I will have to say that Cat makes the most obnoxious faces in the NBA. I still think that Joel Embiid is probably the biggest whiner in the league, but the faces that Karl Anthony Towns makes, the extremely pained expressions where it looks like he, broke a hip or his tummy hurts or something, it just really bothers me, especially when it's a blowout. Like, they were just winning by, 30 points, and he's still making these really pained, horrid expressions like he's being oppressed. I can't stand it. But, they're a good team. What can you say? The Toronto Raptors lost that one. They play the Grizzlies next in Memphis. Grizzlies, one of the best teams in the league. Probably not going to win that one. Then they play the Hawks in Toronto, and then they play the Celtics in Boston. So 3 tough games coming up. The Hawks game is the only one that really I think they have a chance of winning. The Memphis Grizzlies are one of the top teams in the league, and they're right up next. Ja Morant is having a stellar season. They're really getting a lot of contribution from their bench, from their role players. Desmond Bane is obviously very good. Santi Aldama has been a surprise for them. Jalen Wells, Scottie Pippen Jr., their development and scouting has really been kind of top-notch in the NBA, and they are looking like a very strong team. So I don't know if the Raptors are going to be very competitive in that game, but I'm interested to watch. Obviously, some of the storylines are still there. Jacoby Walter is still really putting together a strong rookie season and seems to be getting better and better. So I'll be interested to watch that game. And in any case, that is the video. I hope you enjoyed. What did you think of the trades? Do you have any trades that you think that the Toronto Raptors should make? let me know here in the comments, and also on Twitter and Blue Sky, where you can reach me at Raps Report. I love talking to you guys. It's the only thing keeping me sane through this losing streak. Talking to other Raptors fans, sharing that trauma. I'll try and respond to all of your comments that you leave there and on social media. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Always love to get another subscriber, and you can see what I am doing here. I make an episode after every game, so please subscribe and like that and hit the bell icon so that the video will pop up in your feed more often. And thanks for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.